Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. And today is going to be a very, very different show from what I normally do. But I think it's going to be a wonderful experience and a wonderful opportunity for a lot of women that are looking for stress-free activities. Well, somewhat stress-free activities. Anyway, so I just want to say it is Tuesday evening and it is my time to play with you. And Tuesday is always my favorite time of the week. Why? Because I get to talk to new people, I get to be curious, and I get to fulfill on listening to ordinary people who have extraordinary lives, doing what makes them happy and living life their way. So tonight my guest is Sara Slagle, and she is a fly fisher. I don't know if you call him fisher person or fisher woman or fisher. I have no idea. But anyway, a little bit about me. I had a great weekend. Sunday, I did a stoop sail. I had a client early in the morning, and I saw my neighbor setting up outside doing a stoop sail. And I was like, oh, this is exciting because a stoop sail, you don't really make much money. It depends on what you have. I had a bunch of scarves and a bunch of crap that I actually wanted to get out of my cubby downstairs in the basement, my storage area. And so she was doing it, and I was like, oh, I'll come out and do it with you. So I went out and did it. That was her excuse, was to drink vodka and drink white wine, right? Which I had about a thimbleful of vodka, and I was like giggling like a nutcase. But what's nice about stoop sails is that you actually get to know your neighbors. And even though I know a lot of my neighbors, as you can attest to, I got to meet some new ones. And it's really nice to see, new people in the neighborhood, tons of dogs. We never had so many dogs. I don't know if New York just suddenly got infiltrated by dogs. People are having more dogs, or has it always been that way? I have no idea. But it just seems like there are more dogs now than there ever was. Anyway, less of me and more of the show, which I'm really excited to do. We're talking about fishing today, and not ordinary fishing, fly fishing, all right? And my guest is Sara Slagle. I messed up already. Sara, welcome to the show.
Hey.
So how are you?
I'm good.
Good. So how do we know each other from my local coffee shop,
right,
which I love. I'm always talking about the coffee shop. So I do. It's always talking about what happens at the coffee shop, who I met at the coffee shop, and I meet a ton of people at the coffee shop. Yeah. And a bunch of people have been on the show, and I've known you actually the longest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've known you the longest of the people that are in the coffee shop, because you actually make the coffee shop tick.
Is that true?
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And let me tell you, Sara is one of the great baristas at our coffee shop. She is, but she's more than just a barista. You run that shop. Like, you literally run that shop.
I do.
And without you, that shop is in chaos because the turnover is ridiculous. But like I tell you, one of the gifts that Sara has is last week. Was it last week or the week before last? Where you were juggling, man.
Oof, yeah, there was a couple shifts, so I worked solo.
It was phenomenal. It was like, for me, it was like poetry in motion to watch you. And I know you were like pissed as hell, but
that's where my juggling skills come in handy.
Right, to watch you take the order, flip an egg, make an omelet, come back, take another order, this, coffee macchiato, no foam, white foam, this foam, that foam, and then flip an egg, toast a bagel, toast some bread, and oh my God, it was a lot. But you were amazing to watch.
Oh, really? Thanks.
And I'm so glad I was watching and not doing it.
Yeah.
So Sara, you're a fly fish. How do you say that? Fly fisherwoman?
I guess now the term angler, which is a unisex term.
Right.
That's like one of the original terms, because fisherwoman is not really, it doesn't really roll off the tongue.
No, it doesn't.
And So most people are referred to as anglers. That's just one of the many things that I do. But it's one of my longest passions, which goes back to 5 or 6 is when I
5 or 6.
Yeah, that's when I started.
Cool. So tell us, like, where are you from? Where do you hail from?
So I hail from upstate New York, technically Western New York, if you talk to some people, because it's past the Finger Lakes, in the Chautauqua region, which is about an hour and a half south of Buffalo.
Okay. So how long does it take to get to your house?
From
New York City?
It's a 9-hour drive.
Ouch.
Or a 45-minute flight.
Ouch. So
And
it's like another, it's actually like another country.
No.
I mean, like if you were in Europe, it'd be another country.
Yes. People don't realize how big New York State is until you drive across it.
Right. So
it's huge.
you lived there how many years until you came to New York?
So I lived there until college, and then I would say till 2003, and then I moved to after grad school. I moved to New York, and I've been back to visit, but I have not lived there since I was in high school.
Would you go back to live there?
It would take a lot.
It would take a lot to do that. All right, so you've been angling since what, 6?
6 years old.
Right. And what did you have, like a miniature rod or something?
No, well, no. I mean, they're all the same size, pretty much.
Oh.
So backstory is that I come from a long line of outdoorsmen and women. It's in our blood. You know, my brother, my mom, my dad, my grandfather. It goes back generations.
Right.
Fishing. It's kind of like our religion. A very modern day river runs through it. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie with Brad Pitt from the 90s. Oh, it's a beautiful film based on a book by the same name, which is a book of short stories about this guy named Norman McLean who grew up in he grew up in Montana, which is like the epicenter of fly fishing.
Wasn't like Brokeback Mountain, was it?
No.
Okay, good. Because because the scenes in that movie were really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, Montana's a beautiful state. I've never been. It's on my bucket list, but hopefully one day I'll get there.
Right.
That's the epicenter of fly fishing.
So when you were growing up, did you what Montana is, or where you're from?
Montana. Anyway.
Oh, so where you grew up, were you close to water, or did you have to?
Yeah. So in the Chautauqua region, there's this ginormous lake about the size of Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's 17 miles by 2 miles at the widest point. It takes about an hour to get from end to end on a speedboat. I found out recently. So there's all these little pockets of towns that surround this lake, and this whole region is based around this lake.
Right.
It's a big tourist attraction. It's the birthplace of Lucille Ball. That's kind of all we have. Chautauqua Institution, which is a big thing for the upper class people to come in summer. There's just a lot to do there if you're into being on the water, doing things in the water, around the water.
So what other than angling, what else do they do on the water?
Kayaking is big. I've been doing that for quite some time.
Do they do those little speedboat things?
Yeah, any given day in the summer, you go on the lake and there's easily 100 boats.
Oh, you know what I was thinking? I'm thinking, you said it's as big as Manhattan, so somebody could be way down there in Brooklyn on a speedboat, because I'm thinking lake. They're on the lake and they're going to mess with the fish, and that's going to interfere with, bring back my brain, and it's Manhattan. Okay, it's as big as Manhattan, so that's a huge lake.
It's a big lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
not as big as Lake Erie, which is only 45 minutes away, but it's pretty sizable for a small region like that.
Right. So now this angling, apparently, I mean, I did bone up. I did a few little, I read some stuff. And
do you know why they call it angling?
Why do they call it angling?
Because it's all based on geometry.
Okay, say more about that.
So especially fly fishing, but any type of fishing, you have your rod and your line, which form a triangle.
Right.
And so when you're fly fishing, the name of the game is, do you have the right angle in which you need to get that line to that fish?
Right.
That's why it's called angling. That's nothing too exciting. It's just based on geometry.
Yeah, and you would know that because she knows a lot of stuff.
I do know.
She's the go-to person, and when I have a question, I always go to Sarah, like, do you know? And and I can guarantee she knows something. right? So angling, it's a triangle angle, you said?
There's many different types of angles, but it's all based on angles. The whole thing is based on angles.
So the what's happening is, like, I pulled up some stuff that I read today and watched on YouTube, and apparently not a lot of women are into angling.
Traditionally, no. Traditionally, you talk to some of these older fellas, these, very
stick in the muds.
I like to call them like hardcore sportsmen.
Okay.
Which is a nice way of saying it. They say, sometimes women, there's no place in fly fishing for women. They're just like really in the old, because, women have been in fly fishing since the beginning of time.
Right.
It's just like not as many as men. Why? I don't know. I think it was just like it's like a man thing. It always has been. But lately, in the last 10 years or so, that gender parity line is blurring a lot.
But I'm thinking if it's a man thing, but like as a woman, if I grew up in an area where there was a large body of water and I didn't have money and stuff like that, I would probably go fishing to feed my kids.
Yes.
Right? And so, but apparently now when it comes to fishing, you're not eating the fish.
Yeah, that's a big movement that's been catching on lately. Growing up, we ate everything we caught if it was of a certain size.
Right.
That was one of our main sources of protein.
Right.
And I was actually a pescatarian for quite a long time. That's the only meat that I ate. And, there's this whole conservation movement about catching and releasing, and there's also a spiritual nature attached to that, I find personally. Sometimes it's more about the experience of being on the water, fighting the fish or like the struggle with the fish, and then appreciating the fact that you're having a moment with this complete wild creature and then setting it free. So it's more about the experience rather than
sounds like power to me.
Rather than the attachment.
Right.
It's like letting go of the sense of attachment of having to possess something, whereas you just appreciate the nature part of the aspect and just let it go.
And they're so pretty.
They're
the
beautiful.
fish that I saw today was quite pretty. But we're going to take a break and then we're going to come right back.
Okay.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network. Are you stuck in a rut? Negative thoughts, feelings, and conversations got you down? Hi, I'm Noreen and Sumter, the Potentiator. Tune in every Tuesday at 9 for new ideas on my show, Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way, on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
And we're back on Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. And I'm speaking to Sara Slagle. I say it right? Slagle. Sara Slagle, like slay. Did I say it right? Slagle.
Yes.
Slagle, who is an angler. And if you don't know what an angler is, it means she's a fisher person. Can't say woman, can't say man, I like to say fisher person, an angler. So Sarah, how did you get into angling? So you started at 6, but what was it that called you?
So yeah, it's something that's been in my family for generations.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather specifically was a very serious fly angler.
Did he eat them?
He did, but not all the time.
Right,
I guess
okay.
it depends on what it
I'm obsessed
was.
with
You just want to eat them. And growing up in rural upstate New York,
mm-hmm.
this is pre-internet days. Okay, we didn't have cable either.
Right.
You do stuff outside because you live in this beautiful landscape.
Right.
You appreciate it. We grew all our own stuff and things. And, my dad is a big fisherman. And so when my oldest brother was born, just kind of snowballs. Like the first 2 really got into it. And then I came along. And what's interesting is that, so my parents, especially for at the time, we're talking late 70s, early 80s, are very forward-thinking liberals,
mm-hmm.
Not kind of like how parents are today, like these new parents,
right.
And my mom especially, she kind of raised us with the notion that there's no such thing as boy things and girl things.
Right.
We just do things. Right. The whole family, we went fishing all the time, like 4 or 5 nights a week. We went camping every weekend in the summer. And that's just...
Do I've never been camping.
It's amazing.
And I've never been fishing with a rod. It's on my list.
You should put it on your list. And that's just like what we did together as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And so growing up, I was kind of a daddy's girl. Still am. Always will be, I'm sure. And if you wanted to spend time with my dad, you kind of had to take up fishing.
Right.
He was out there 5 nights a week. So it's like, you can either get into it or you can be stuck at home with my mom,
right,
the fishing widow. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be a fishing widow. So I picked it up, had a knack for it. We all have, my brother especially, all have this like insane innate ability to just be good
right.
at it. And I actually really enjoyed it. Did it all through my childhood. Took a dip, when I went to college. I didn't do it as much until maybe a few years ago.
Right.
I picked it up again.
So what do you love about it? What is it that, as you describe it, as your passion?
I like connecting with nature the most, just being out there and like being able to experience, the space around you and that we live on this beautiful planet. I love the conservation part of fishing. That's like a big part of the underlayer of the subculture. And there's also if you're really, really into it, there's also this spiritual nature about it.
Right.
Like I had explained, it was our religion growing up. And what I mean by that is that it's actually time that you just like reflect on yourself.
Right.
You're out there, you shut everything off, you have no phone, and we didn't have phones back then either. Right. But you're just
in the moment.
You're in the moment, you're experiencing life in the present. You're not worrying about what happened yesterday or what's happening tomorrow. You're just there right then trying to catch that fish.
Right. So what I learned today about why it's called fly fishing is because the fish eat the flies.
Yeah, fish eat bugs. A lot of people don't know that.
Yes, of course, they eat bugs and stuff, right? If you kind of knew what they ate, you probably wouldn't eat fish, but I do like fish. But they eat the bugs. And one of the videos that I saw today, the guy had all these different bugs on his hand. And why it's called fly fishing, what I picked up, tell me if I'm wrong, is because the lure that they use to catch the fish resembles a variety of different flies that could quite be in season. Yes, and also the cyclical life of that bug. So even if you pick one specific bug, you might have 10 bugs going from nymph, larvae, adult stage, and so forth. And that's one of the things that what's his name? His name is one of the, like, I would call him the father of nymphing technique, which his name is Joe Humphreys. They call him the master of fly fishing. He's a conservationist. He's also, he headed up the Penn State angling team, and he educates and teaches he's taught over thousands of people how to fly fish. So he's some kind of fly fishing god.
Yeah.
Right. And so what he says that you have to learn line control. He's 84 years old, actually. That video might have been a lot older, but I didn't really sort of look at the date. But he says it's line, you have to learn line control. So, it looks very sort of like a lasso. That's how it looks to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very similar.
So you lasso it out. It's got the lure on the end. And it's not like you're actually trying to, it seems to me like it's a dance with the fish, right? With the line and the fish, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a rhythmic movement that's required, which is the learning curve of the sport. It's something that's very easy to learn and hard to master.
Right.
Fly fishing is actually the easiest form of fishing that you could teach a child. A lot of people don't really, there's all these misconceptions. They think it's like, oh, it's super, super hard. Well, it kind of is if you're not really understanding the aspect or like the geometry or aesthetic of it. And it just takes time and dedication, which is why fly fishing is perceived as like this purest sport of all these, people like sometimes describe fly fishermen or anglers as, what's the word that I want? Like elite, I guess, for lack of a better term. But
people
really,
have a lot of leisure on their time. It
takes time. People spend their whole lives trying to master the sport.
I was watching another video online, and it was Bakewell, and it was in the UK. And it was beautiful. It was like a beautiful fishing. I'm going to just call it a fishing range, for want of a better way. Yeah. Right, a fishing range. And what they said was that what I heard, I don't know if this is what they say, but what I heard was that they actually breed their own fish, right? And put the fish in the water. I thought it was kind of weird.
Yeah, that's basically farm raising fish. So when you buy, I don't want to burst the bubble for a lot of people, but when you buy fish at the supermarket, 9 times out of 10, that's how it was. That's how it came to be.
So they have these fish, they rear them, and then they put, but maybe they put them, I'm not going to say they put them in as, maybe they put them in as little eggs. I'm just going to be good about that.
Yeah, probably
Most
like
likely.
little
tiny baby fish, right? Like, not toddler fish. And then these men come in and they actually keep the place clear. It was beautiful. It wasn't a natural environment, but what you're talking about with the river is a natural environment, right?
Yeah.
But how do they manage it? How do they take care of Manhattan, so to speak?
There's every state and every county has water conservationists that work for the state. My sister-in-law happens to be one of those people that kind of manages pH level and chemical aesthetics of the water. And there's really, where I'm from, they don't control where the fish go. It's just like their natural habitat. Right. With every lake, there is a river outlet. That's just kind of how it works. Right. And there's actually 3 river outlets in Chautauqua on the lake, all from different corners. And usually, like with steelhead, which is a form of trout, steelhead are actually lake flounder. And
lake flounder?
Yeah, they spawn in the lake. And then when they get to be like of a certain age, they kind of like drift out in the outlet and into the river. And that's where you would catch a steelhead trout. Right. Not necessarily in the lake because, they're like babies. But
you wouldn't catch one of those, though. You would let that.
Hopefully not. Like, I would never keep it. I would always put it back. Right. But,
some of these fish were really beautiful. Like, they had beautiful colors. They had like pink going through them, blues. Some of them were speckled. There were all kinds of fish.
They also have very interesting textures. Trout don't have scales. Okay. So they're very slippery. And they're, when you catch a trout, you're supposed to keep it wet.
And I guess that's why they have a net in the water so the trout goes in.
Lost many a trout slipped through my hands when I'm pulling it off, off the line. Usually if you're fishing with people, you have a net person. I was a net girl for a long time. Also lead rower.
Right.
It's kind of like a team building aspect. You have a rower and a spotter and a net person, and then.
So tell me about the spotter. I mean, I kind of got a general idea of like there's some kind of intuitive activity when you're out there fishing, because you got to be able to
know where they are.
Yeah. You got to be able to distinguish where they are, is what I've
exactly. So if you know a lot about, river and lake habitats, I mean, that definitely works to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just something I've learned just by growing up near lakes and rivers, is like, you just know like time of day, time of season, if it's evening hatch, morning hatch. With the spotter, usually that person, has more of a water sensibility, and they know how to quote unquote read water, which is basically not only being able to actually see the fish in the water, saying, hey, it's over here, you should cast over here, but more like knowing where they are, how the current is running, or if it's bubbling, if it's, there's so many variables that go along with like trying to catch
like a science.
Fish. It is like a science. It's a lot that you pick up just by doing it, that you don't realize.
So for me, what I saw today was like the guy was saying you have to be able to see where the fish is by what's going on in the water, right? So I guess my thought would be like if you threw a pebble in or if the fish popped his head up, it would make a ripple.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd probably, I'm just making this up, right? But I'm just assuming by watching those videos, there's a ripple. Oh, let me cast off over there.
That's kind of how it works. Yeah. I mean, it's just very basic human interaction.
Right.
Like the rawest form of human interaction, just like it is a sense of hunting in a way.
Right. So when we get back, I want to talk about the peacefulness of it. I want to talk about 50-50 on the water and women.
Okay, great.
Okay, so we'll be right back.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
Do you love or are you intrigued about New York City and its neighborhoods? I'm Jeff Goodman, host of Rediscovering New York, a weekly show that showcases New York's history and its extraordinary neighborhoods. Every Tuesday live at 7 p.m., we focus on a particular neighborhood and explore its history, its vibe, its feel, and its energy. Tune in live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network. Are you stuck in a rut? Negative thoughts, feelings, and conversations got you down? Hi, I'm Noreen and Sumter, the Potentiator. Tune in every Tuesday at 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time and listen for new ideas on my show, Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way, on talkradio.nyc.
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
And we're back on Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. And I'm speaking to Sara Slagle, who is an angler. She's my first angler. Okay, so we were talking about 50-50 on the water. And I said that what I gleaned from it was that it's an opportunity to introduce women to the sport of, and I think of fishing as sport. It's like you're not running up and down, but
it's sport.
The sport of fishing. So tell us a little bit about that.
So 50-50 on the water, it's the campaign by the Orvis Company. Orvis is like one of the original fishing companies in the world.
Right. O-V-I-S.
O-V-R-I-S.
O-R-V-I-S. O-R-V-I-S. Okay, Orvis.
And they launched this campaign a few years ago. I'm just speaking on behalf of them. I'm not part of it in any way.
But she loves it.
But I'm very passionate about what they're doing because, I grew up with, sometimes you're out on the water. You might just be by yourself or like with a couple other people. And then you'll get like this one guy who just has to be a hothead and is like, what are you doing out here? it's not always pleasant,
Right.
but it does happen. And so they launched this campaign to, get women more interested and involved in the sport, but also to increase gender parity within sport. So it's not like a battle of the sexes. We're not trying to say it's men against women. It's actually to get men and women fishing together and like have a more equal say in like the sport and
and the conservation.
Yeah, and the marketing aspect and like gear made for women.
Right.
Because growing up there was no such thing as women's waders. I wore my brother's waders.
Right.
And they're always too big.
Just for the people that are online, what are waders? I get it. I know what they are, but what are they?
Yeah, they're just basically those overalls that you wear in the water so you don't get wet.
They're made of rubber or canvas?
They used to be made of rubber. Now they're made of like neoprene or nylon, more breathable fabrics that are more waterproof.
Okay, so I'm thinking of the rubber because these things generally come up, underneath your breast.
Yeah, they have hip waders or chest waders. You have just the boots. There's different kinds.
And so you have those things on. Does water get in? Or?
No.
So water doesn't get in. Okay.
That's the whole point.
Yeah, but like neoprene, doesn't water get in?
Not when they're lined. There's a lining.
Oh, okay.
They're also, but neoprene, back in the day, those were like very hot. So when you're out on the water, it's like 90 degrees. You're sweating.
Right.
And so now they have more lighter, breathable fabrics that are like, they've actually come a long way in the science of like,
right. Because I was looking at a lot of these men that were in, even the women, but I get to that. They had these jackets with, this guy had this thing that you picked and let's get the snippers out. And you get the snippers out to snip the wire on the fly thing that he just made. And he had like a whole ream of things on his chest, like tools. Is that how it is?
Yeah. That's kind of like, there are a few basic tools you have to have on your person just to survive in the water because you have to be able to safely take the hook out with forceps or to nip your line off if it gets caught.
That's what it's called. It's called a nipper.
They're called nippers. They're basically fancy nail clippers.
Right. That's what
all they are.
That's what I thought.
They cost $30. They're basically nail clippers.
That's what I thought when I saw it.
Yeah. Floating agents.
What's a floating agent?
It's basically this chemical thing that you put on the fly to keep it afloat.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you do want to do surface area fishing. Like if the fly is just skating on the water, that's what you're mimicking.
Okay.
There's a whole rabbit hole you can go down.
And I'm imagining this sport is pretty expensive.
Yeah. It's a bit pricey. Your average fly rod can go anywhere from $200 to $800, depending on
the wheel thing.
That's the reel. So the rod is like $200 to $800, and the reel is like. But it's an investment that'll last you a lifetime as long as you don't break it. And every serious angler has at least 3.
And what is the I call it the string.
The line.
Yeah. What is the line made of? And what were they used to made of?
Monofilament was the original. So original fly rods were made with bamboo, which they still make those, but those are thousands of dollars because they're handmade.
Right.
Most fly rods are handmade. Some of your higher end scales, like your sage rods and things, are all handmade by real people.
Which I know nothing about.
Anyway,
so
that could be a whole other show. Most rods are made out of fiberglass or graphite.
Right.
And they have the cork handle, the original cork handle. And originally the fly line was monofilament, and now it's the backing, which is like fancy cord. There's 3 backing, the line and the tippet.
So this is not something that one goes into all of a sudden. So what's this?
You can, but it's very overwhelming because you need a bunch of stuff just to start.
Well, what would a person need just to start?
A rod,
waders.
A rod and a reel. You actually don't necessarily need waders if you're just doing offshore or if you're doing bank.
I think I'd want to go in the water.
You can, there's sometimes in the summer, I just go in with shorts.
Okay.
If it's warm enough, and some boots so you don't cut your feet on the rocks.
Right.
But you don't actually have to have, $500 waders to go fishing.
But can you pick up some of this stuff? Like I'm sure upstate you could pick up some of this stuff.
They actually have fly shops in New York City.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. But like I'm just talking about like if you went like stooping, stoop sales, you might be able to pick up stuff.
No. People who have this stuff kind of hold on to it
forever and they use it.
Yeah.
Frequently. Do people? So you talked about. I was about to ask. People go fishing in the winter. Of course they do. They go ice fishing because we talked about that, and I've seen that. I saw that in a movie actually, ice fishing, where they had this little hut, and they dug.
Was it Grumpy Old Men? Because that was a big scene in that movie.
I think it was the Grumpy Old Men where they had, and I was like, it looked really interesting, but it looked really cold.
It is very cold.
So have you done that?
I have. I went a few times as a child, did not like it.
Okay.
It's very cold. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of unknown in terms of fishing for fish on the ice. You know, you're on that same lake and there's probably a foot of ice between you and the freezing cold water.
Right.
And depending on how deep the lake is, that could be dangerous.
And we talked about global warming since the temperatures have shifted. Does that affect the fish? How is it affecting the fish? The water warming?
It doesn't really affect the fish that much. It might affect the spawning in the springtime. It more or less affects winter fishing in general, because if there's not enough ice to stand on, you can't do it. So,
but it doesn't affect the fish.
No, I don't think so.
Right.
I'm sure it does in some capacity. It affects everything, but not in like a drastic way.
Right. And so, you have tissue handy? Can you get me some of that napkin right there? I'm sweating like a banshee. Like a
ice fishing is actually on the decline because of global warming.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
So tell me, so they said that the percentage of women in the last 5 years, it was at 18% of the population did fishing. Now it's up over 30.
Which is amazing.
Right.
You know, I personally don't know a lot of female anglers. I know some.
You're the first one.
I've seen them all over the place.
Right.
I only know a few because I was a tomboy. I had brothers. I just, grew up with a lot of boys around, and still have like a lot of guy friends, more guy friends than girlfriends. There's actually two types of women who fish. Type 1, they grew up doing it with their father, brother, uncle, grandfather, what have you.
Right.
Type 2 is a woman who takes it up to woo a man who happens to be a fisherman and doesn't want to be left at home. Right. And then there's the third type, which is very rare, which is someone who's a badass who just takes up the sport because they just love doing it.
Right. Or they just tried it and just really liked it.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have here, so that's 30% over. That's good. Now they're sort of marketing to women, and they're marketed in the way I described it is that because it's peaceful, it's stress-free, it's camaraderie, it's team building, and that's the kind of stuff that women like to do.
Right. And there's actually this whole marketing aspect that goes along with that I found out recently when I was shopping for new waders. So I went on this trip with my dad a couple weeks ago when I went home upstate, and I needed new waders because I just needed new ones. Right. And I was shopping around at my normal places that I shop, online mostly. And I just happened to notice something, not only before I worked at a coffee shop, I worked in advertising and marketing. So I have like that kind of background, and I just happened to notice that a lot of these big companies, who I'm not going to name because I don't want to call them out, I'm actually patrons of theirs, do not depict women in their marketing campaigns.
Right.
Until recently. There's, Orvis has always tried to put women in like their catalogs and things, but back in the day, or even up until 10 years ago, you go into a website or a catalog and there's a woman fishing with her husband or her boyfriend or some man. Right. They very rarely have just a woman or a group of women. Yeah. And I just find that really interesting, especially in this day and age. And there's one company in particular, very famous fishing company, who does not in any way, shape, or form on their Instagram, on their website, anything, have a single woman pictured in their marketing.
And so you say boo to that
imagery. But I love their product. I own several of their products.
So maybe you should write them a letter.
I've thought about it.
So I think one of the beliefs is that it's a man's sport and women find it intimidating. I don't know what kind of women they're talking about. women find it intimidating?
I guess women who are not outdoorsy would find it intimidating.
And one of the things that I read was that because it's conservationist, women can have a larger voice in that.
Yeah, because it's our nature to be nurturing. You know, you talk about Mother Earth, like that all stems from the divine feminine aspect, and so, you know, it's in our nature to be more nurturing to the planet. You know, and
most of all, it's an opportunity for women to get away from it all.
Yes,
it's like a weekend away fishing.
You know, there's so many times where I'll pull a double shift at the coffee shop, and 9 times out of 10, I'll either have my rod with me or I'll go home and get it, and I'll just go throw it out there in the park for like an hour or two.
And tell people what park you're throwing it out in.
I do fish in Prospect Park.
Right.
There's so many places to fish in the 5 boroughs. So many places.
Okay.
People kind of lose sight of the fact that there's so much water around us, especially if you're into saltwater fly fishing. You know, there's Jamaica Bay, Sheepshead Bay. You go to Montauk, which is big for striped bass, and you know that's just like a big thing.
Okay.
So there's so many places to go, and you can fish in Prospect Park. It is catch and release only, because it's such a small lake.
Right.
But every time I'm there, I just see so many people out there, and it's just like great. You see kids, people of all ages, colors, diversity. It's beautiful.
So, question for you: so in Prospect Park, it's catch and release, but like, do they fill the lake up with fish, or the fish spawn?
I don't actually know. I think it's both.
Because I'm thinking there are birds there.
There are birds there.
All kinds of birds.
One of my spots, there's a blue heron nest.
And they swoop down, grab a fish, and, you know, keep it going. So
they must spawn, because otherwise there would be nothing left. You know, it's only so big. So I feel like it's a little bit of both. But, you know, I don't really know because I don't work for the Parks Department. But, yeah.
Cool. Interesting. This is a very calm show. Normally, like, my shows are really high energy and like crazy, but this is a very sort of calm fishing
This is a
experience.
fireside chat, because this is what...
So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come right back.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
I'm the aptly named host of Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. Big nonprofit ideas for the other 95%. Fundraising, board relations, social media. My guests and I cover everything that small and mid-sized shops struggle with. If you have big dreams and a small budget, you have a home at Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio. Fridays 1 to 2 Eastern at talkingalternative.com.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
TalkingAlternative.com.
So we're back, and I learned about the uni knot. The uni knot. So, you said that you use on average about 5 knots.
Everyone has an arsenal of knots that they kind of stick to.
Right.
You know, that's like sort of the essence of being a nautical person, is that you know knots, whether you're a boater or a sailor or what have you, there's knots involved.
Right.
And so
how many, you have 5 knots, And each knot, you have to use your nipper because you have to take that lure off.
Yeah, or if it falls off, that happens a lot.
Right.
If you hook it on something, or if the fish just eats it right off because your knot wasn't as tight as you thought it was.
But he can't eat it. It's fake.
It gets stuck in there.
Oh my God. So it gets stuck in the fish.
Sometimes. I mean, you don't want that to happen, but it grows out of them.
Okay.
It doesn't stay there forever.
It doesn't stay there forever.
No.
Like a couple of weeks.
Not even.
Oh, good. Okay, so you've got your tippet, you've got your lure, and you lose about a foot a session?
Depending
on how many knots you tie.
Depending on how many times you've
using.
changed your fly, it's just like general maintenance. You just like expect to replace it every couple times.
So you lose about a foot, and you said you have to be an average of 9 foot, the size of your.
So your tippet is basically should be the length of your rod, which is most fly rods are 9 feet.
Right. And for me, it's like a string, but it's called the tippet. Like, because I had to think in my head, tippet, string, tippet, no, tippet. Right. And so you lose.
Tippet is part of the leader. So the leader, which comes off your fly line, is part of the butt, and it's a tapered monofilament.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm telling you this. You don't need to know all this.
No, I don't need to know
unless
this.
You're actually going fishing.
No, I'm not going to go fishing. But it's interesting to have because you never, I guess when you don't know what you don't know, you just don't know, and you can't imagine what it, or, I'd like to go fishing, but like, what does that entail, right? What do I have to get? Like, do I have to get anything? Are there any groups that people can go fishing with that they supply all the gear?
Yes. There's so many fishing groups in the 5 boroughs, especially in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. There's a Brooklyn Fishing Club, which spans across all forms of fishing, not just fly fishing. There's a women's fly fishing club specifically, which is actually hard to get into.
Mm-hmm. Why is it difficult to get into?
They're very selective. Oh. And I understand why. I get it, because they want to keep it small. And anyway, there's actually a guy, I don't know his name, but you can Google it. There's a guy who works in the park. He doesn't work for the park. He works in the park, and he will teach you how to fly cast. And you can rent a rod from him, and all you have to have is like a day fishing license.
And how do you find him? Like, you go into prospectpark.com fishing?
I don't know if he has I've never had to use him, but I've heard about this guy who teaches people. I want to say it's like maybe $45 a session for like a couple hours. Oh. He'll teach you the basics, and then you can just go from there. If you're really interested, he teaches a lot of kids too, which is great.
So you have to go into Prospect Park, and maybe
I'm sure you can
a picture of him or something.
Google. Yeah, I should have looked it up before.
Yeah, but you didn't know I was going to ask that question.
I did not.
So tell me, do you have books that you read about fishing? Are you deep in that? Who would you recommend that people study?
Well, if we're focusing on women in fly fishing, there's actually a book that I love called A Different Angle, which is a book of short stories about women's experience in fly fishing, and it's a beautiful read. It's hard to find because it's out of print, but you can occasionally get it on eBay or Amazon or the library because it's from the 90s.
Oh, okay. And what I was going to ask you something about fishing. Something about recommending. What would you recommend for Orvis and these companies to do? What if you could do anything, right, and make a difference for women in fishing? What would you want to do, and how would you want to do it?
That's a great question. Like for me personally?
Yeah, and it spawns out with other women.
Like maybe 10 years ago, I would say like, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was an all-women fishing club? And there are, and it's phenomenal. But what I really want to see is a general through and through co-ed fishing club where men and women are treated and respected equally within the sport, and there's no competition, no judgment, because that's the thing. Sometimes when you go fishing with a bunch of guys, they treat you like a girl. No. And like they don't treat you like an equal, I'd say. I know a lot of I don't want to like pigeonhole all men, because there are so many exceptions, and I know a lot of exceptions. You know, I have a lot of close friends who are fly anglers who go fishing with women all the time, and they respect them as equals, and I think that's great. But there's a general sense that like some of these older guys just will never see you as an equal in their eyes.
Right. Well, they're dying off anyway. So let me ask you, are there any, so you said the word competition, and that was the question that I was going to ask you. Are there any fly fishing competition?
Oh yeah, there's a competition for everything.
Okay.
I never did any as a kid, but my brothers did. There's all different types where you're just, you know, you go, you sign up, you have your competition like number type thing, and you go fishing for the day, and like you have to catch so many, and they're all tagged and things. But there's also this one fly fishing competition. I want to say it's in either Bozeman, Montana, or like Idaho. It's like out west, where you have to fish for 3 days.
3 days straight?
Not like, you know, it's like 8 hours a day for 3 days.
Okay.
And each
you gotta
day,
be really into fishing. For 8 hours.
You got to be able to stand in a river for 8 hours. And in this competition,
I'd have a tray and a cup of tea.
You only get one fly per day. When you lose that fly, you're out. And you can catch as many fish on that one fly. So like the whole point of this competition is you have to know your stuff, pick the fly, know what you're doing, like in terms of like what's out there, the weather, you know, time of day, the water temperature, everything. Are they spawning? Is it spring? Is it summer?
And if you lose your fly, you're
out.
Now, do people, low battery here. How are we going to plug in? Are we plugged in? We're losing low battery on the computer. When you are, lost my train of thought, when you are fishing and you have one lure, I was going to say, ask a question about the flies. Do they ever use real flies? That was my question.
No.
They don't use real flies. And is fly fishing different from using a worm?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because trout don't eat worms. They eat bugs.
So you only catch trout when you fly fish?
No. Anything.
I know they have browns. Is that a trout?
That is a trout.
Okay. There are an unlimited amount of
There's
trout.
a lot of trout. But here's the big misconception about fly fishing. It's not just for trout. If it's in the water, you can catch it on the fly.
Right.
You know, when I went fishing with my dad a couple weeks ago.
Where that term comes from, on the fly?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
On the fly is like, I caught this on the fly.
Right.
Meaning on the fly rod.
Got it.
You know, when I went fishing with my dad, we were going for bass. So I had my bass popper because that's what I was going for.
Right.
And I ended up catching, on a total fluke, I caught a walleye on the fly, which is actually not a normal thing. It's actually a very rare occurrence.
Okay, so you caught a walleye. What is a walleye?
It's a type of fish.
I know it's a kind of fish, but what is it does it look more like a trout?
No, they're green, they have stripes, they're like mid-size. They're interesting to catch because it's just like they don't really fight back. They just kind of lay there and you reel them. On a spinning rig, they do, you know, it's a little bit more fun, but on the fly, you know, because I don't even know how or why this happened, because a walleye would never eat the bug that I had on the line. Right. And when I caught it, I actually was pissed because I'm like, this is not what I wanted.
Right.
I was like, I'm going for bass. I didn't want this.
So you threw it back in again?
Of course.
So did you catch any bass?
No.
You didn't? Okay.
Not that day.
So, all right, let's see what other questions I have here. What do I have there? Technot. Outdoor. We talked about the catalog. We talked about women connecting. It's beautiful. Like it's, you know, I would probably just get caught up in the beauty of the environment and be sort of like not really fishing.
I lost many a fish by staring at the landscape,
right,
or taking pictures,
right,
of the landscape and things like that. That does happen because you're just like in the middle of this beautiful space, right, and you're like, I forget that we live
it's wide
here.
Open and there's no New York City hum. and there's no electrical hum. So it's probably just beautiful.
You know, even if you go deep enough into Prospect Park, you lose the city hum. You forget you're in the city for like an hour.
Cool. So what is there a question that you'd like me to ask you that I haven't asked you? Is there anything that you'd like me to ask you?
I don't know.
You don't know. So, all right, you don't have a question. So we're getting to the end of the show. And is there anything you want to say, anything you want to add in, anything that you want to just like elaborate on 50/50? Or engage women, because this is going to be evergreen. So what would you like to say to women to get us up and out into the world of fishing?
It doesn't, you know, not even
anyone, just anyone for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, especially nowadays where we're kind of in this environment where you can get everything delivered to you. You can spend days in your apartment and totally survive without stepping foot outside. True. And, you know, I live in this city, and I'm a rustic person at heart. You know, I love being outside, and even though there's like all these things that I grew up doing, you actually can do them here. Like you can go kayaking in Marine Park. You can go
kayaking down by Dumbo.
Yeah. There's just so much you can do here, and like people forget that you can connect with nature within the city itself if you know where to find it. Right. And I encourage people, like, even if you are not totally interested and you want to invest all the money, like just give it a try, rent some equipment, and like you never know when you're just gonna like pick up something. Right. You know, you don't have to
be open.
You don't have to have fished from birth to be a fisherman. A lot of people
an angler.
A lot of people do pick up later in life. That's also a big thing that, you know.
So Sara, I just want to say thank you very much for speaking up and offering to come on the show and talk about this subject, because it's not an ordinary conversation. I think it's an extraordinary conversation, and I just want to say thank you for coming on, and thank you for spending time with me. I did do my homework, and I learned quite a bit.
Very impressive.
About fish. Now I can have a conversation with a crusty old fisherman and not bore him to tears. So thank you so much for coming on the show. This is Noreen Sumter signing off on Beyond Potential. Live life your way. So live life your way, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.